doesn't want to edit it. He's not an animal. He just hates editing. Yeah, he hates editing.
I don't hate it. I just can't do it. Yeah. Okay. Right. Someone else do the intro then.
Okay. Hello, everybody. This is episode 2 of the Singularity Strokes Podcast. My name's Adam. We've got. Want to introduce yourself, guys?
Yeah. My name's Jack Atherton.
And I'm Jim Farey, but today I'll be Constantine Kissing, having fascinating conversations with other people.
Yeah. Who are you going to be punching down at? Who's going to be your Francis?
Ooh, I don't know. Not you guys.
We definitely set out our political stall there by referencing that, I think. We need to, if we're going to do it like trigonometry, we need to have, well, if it was trigonometry, it'd be like more like Roland drums or something, wouldn't it? It'd be like electronic drums. But we need we need to have alliterative names, don't we? Like Constantine Kissing and Francis Foster.
Well, I was thinking that we could have an intro where it's like, this is the welcome to Singularity Strokes Podcast, where we have long conversations about short sounds.
Well, I still like the name, the Indike. What was it?
The Sons of Indike.
The Sons of Indike, not the Children of Indike. The Sons of Indike.
Yeah, molecularization.
Jack, are you recording your audio again? I mean, it's really good this time, but just as a backup.
Oh shit, no.
Well, it doesn't matter. I mean, if you can, cool. But if not, cool. Anyway.
Okay, then this is Singularity Strokes, where we have boring conversations with unknown people. Jack's most well known.
Yeah.
What? We should also like. I would like to ask what. First of all, Jim, who are you and what do you do?
Who am I? Well,
yeah, just quickly.
In West Philadelphia, born and raised. Who am I? I am a drummer from Nottingham. And
we're all drummers. Well, not all drummers from Nottingham, are we? I'm from Manchester, but sorry, go on.
I think you're from Nottingham.
Okay. We're all drummers.
Okay, so I spent most of my life in Nottingham, and I've played like metal bands, punk bands. I've done cruise ships. I've done some theatre work. I'm a bit of a nerd. I'm still trying to learn how to sound good, and I've been teaching full time as like my main job since 2006. But I started teaching a little bit when I was like 17, and I'm 37, so 20 years ago. And I just love drums and arguing, basically. So later on, when we get into the technique thing, I'm just going to kill it.
And
okay.
And you have an incredible mind. And on to the next incredible mind, Adam.
The Kraken.
Yeah. Okay, so my name's. I just had a thought then when Jim was talking, because we're all from Nottingham. We could be called Jeff Indike's Merry Men. Okay, my name's Adam. I'm originally from Manchester. I live in Nottingham. I'm a self-taught drummer. Been drumming for almost 20 years. And I was just like a scene guy, just in as many bands as I could, made as many albums as I could. Did that touring with more function bands than I can remember. So yeah, function bands, originals bands, making music, recording music, touring, and then various different kind of world music sort of projects. And then what do we do now? And now I'm a teacher, so I teach privately. I've taught in secondary schools and primary schools and schools for autism. And yeah, that's kind of very roughly my sort of deal. Jack.
Amazing. Adam's amazing. Can I chime back in and just say, Adam and I have played in some of these percussion ensembles together, which is
yes,
amazing.
we have. Yeah, that's right.
And we've done quite a bit together. And I'm definitely more now on the teaching end of the spectrum. I probably always have been. But if that wasn't clear, then yeah, I look at Adam and go, oh, you've done too many gigs. And I'm sure he looks at me and thinks, you've done too much teaching.
I think maybe the way it divides up is I'm sort of just focused on making art, really. Jim, you're kind of the teaching head, and Jack, you're like the career drummer, the slick professional dude who's doing it.
With like clothes that aren't jogging bottoms.
Yeah.
I like clothes. That's why I'm.
So Jack, you have incredible minds. What about your dad, so?
Beautiful.
So a Nottingham drummer that was, a local drummer and teacher in the scene from 18, 19 throughout my 20s, just function bands, cover bands across genres, and then into more session work, and then eventually in 2011 performing with the artist Jake Bugg, which I continue to do, and now reside in Tokyo when I'm not touring or working in the UK. But recently, in the last couple of years, back to teaching as well as performing. So I've got a balance of teaching drums and playing drums. Yeah.
Nice. Hands up if you've studied with Jack.
Well, you see, it's interesting. It's interesting because I was fortunate enough to get taught by you, but you pay me.
Yeah. Hands up if you've studied with Jim. Hands up if you've studied with me.
Yeah. Okay.
That's it. It's definitely a mutual agreement of who teaches who. We've been teaching each other for many years, and that's why I wanted to do this, because for me, there's no two greater minds to talk about drumming with, and that's kind of what I want to try and capture. Because there's a lot of discussions that we have, the three of us. I mean, the two of you have more, just kind of because of geography and frequenting the same gay bars.
True.
So
so it's just
because that's what you talk about in gay bars. You just get in there and talk about drumming, right?
Yeah,
I think that's what
bumming, drumming, it's all the same. So
said he wanted to drum on my face. I don't know what that meant though. The music was kind of loud.
Yeah. Jim's got props. See, Jim's got a door to leave through. Have you got a lapel mic?
Now, Billy.
You got a lapel mic on. You can still hear you even though you left the room. Oh shit! Is that the technology? The mics in the earbud?
Yeah, but when it dies, obviously I'm going to go back to my rubbish sound that we had last time. So, okay. Right. So, Jack, you were saying about the conversations.
Yeah. No. Just I think when it comes to discussions of any nature, but in this case drums, or anything, because we'll probably talk a wide range of things if this continues on. But you two are like who I who I first think of if there's anything that I want to discuss. It's you. You two are always the first two people that I think that I always want to speak to, because it's just the mental capacity and the intelligence between the both of you is mate. It's true.
I think it's mutual, definitely mutual as well. Which is why we're all here, isn't it? And I think, just to add to what Jack said then, I think the whole point of this podcast really, I mean, I think the first one was a little bit stillborn, but I think the point of this podcast really is we're all kind of seekers in a way, aren't we? We're all kind of looking for new ways of looking at old ideas, and to make our own practice as drummers and our own effectiveness as musicians more efficient, and trying to inject, new ways of playing, new ways of thinking about techniques, new ways of thinking about like broader drumming concepts, and how those drumming concepts relate to concepts outside of drumming, and how they're influenced by things outside of drumming. So theories about art and philosophy and science, and just trying to pull it all in really, and create, I suppose, like a conceptual singularity about drumming, because everything in human life is networked with everything else, isn't it? Drumming, I think the problem with the drumming conversation is we go, well, here's my life, and then here's drumming, and it's like, no, it's integrated within your life. It's part of everything else, and I think we're attempting, as clumsily as we can do, to sort of pull in all of our different ideas and slam them all together to see whether we can pull something new out of the drumming conversation, at least for ourselves. So that's my take on kind of what we're doing.
I concur.
I think with that as well, it is clumsy, no matter how much time we've spent studying from great drummers and listening and paying for lessons. We're gonna reiterate that again and again and again. And I think one of the things that I hope, so I'm into conveying ideas to people, I hope that we can end up in a position where someone gets something useful. Jack's just going to have to go and murder his wife. What should we do? Should we just count down from 10? 9, 8. Oh, that was quick. Jack, you're going to have to throw Seiko out the window, mate.
Yeah, can you hear Seiko?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Kinetic, mate.
We just heard this Japanese cacophony.
ごめんね。聞こえます。みんな聞こえます。セコの声。ごめん。すみません。
He lost his wife and went like that.
Can you tell her we're really sorry?
Yeah. It reminds me of that Eddie Murphy stand-up.
Yeah. So I just hope that through us talking about something, either we can figure something out that's useful for us, or someone else might go, oh, there's a refined nugget of information, because really being a seeker, like Adam was saying, your learning curve's kind of vertical, and then as it flattens out, it gets harder and harder to find those nuggets. And one of the ways that you do it is just spending hours playing and listening to music, and another way that you do it is by listening to what other people think.
Yeah, and and probably important to point out, like, although Jack's the most well-known out of us, like me and Jim, really in the global drumming perspective, well, I'm definitely a nobody. Like, Jim's probably known by a lot of well-known drummers, because he's interacted with them on this kind of teaching and clinic level. But we've all spent time with some of the big names in drumming. Like, we've all met Chapin and been taught by him. Jack spent time with Don Famularo. I've spent time with him. Jim, you have. We've spent time with, like, I've spent time with Klaus Hessler and Sergio Bellotti and Pat Petrillo. We've all met Lang. We've all met like a ton of different people, and been influenced by their ideas. So I don't think we're coming at this we're definitely not coming at it from a complete beginner's perspective. No. I don't think any of us would have the gumption to say that we're mega advanced as players. Like, I'm definitely not. Jim, I'd say technically you're the most knowledgeable, and Jack, I'd say in terms of your facility, you're clearly the best out of all three of us. So important to kind of put that into perspective, I think.
Yeah, I think I'm still terrible at music, which is always fun. But yeah, I think if we look at ourselves as kind of people that have gone a certain distance, and if nothing else, we've got the free time and the temperament to share with other people. Whereas, sometimes people don't have that temperament or just don't have time because they're too busy doing 90,000 recordings a week. I've just got to clarify though. I never studied with Chapin.
Really?
No, I never met him. I don't think.
Really?
Were you not at that clinic in 2003?
No.
You
I would have been in Liverpool.
We all just to get the a little bit of props going. We all got invited to his memorial concert in 2010, though, in New York.
Yeah.
To the school we were connected to, so we all went to that. That was cool. But I think just to add another thing, when we were talking to Chris the other day, we were talking about teaching a lot and the problems that you run into when you're teaching students. And I think one of the questions we were attempting to answer in those conversations was thinking of techniques and concepts outside of drumming, bringing them into drumming and using them to answer questions about the walls that students run into or the walls we run into as teachers. Instead of just going, here's a student with a drumming problem, so I'm going to get a drumming idea to fix it, is going outside of that and going, well, is there a psychological idea I can use to fix it? Or is there a sports idea I can use to fix it? Like analogizing things outside of drumming and bringing them into the drumming sphere and going, can we use this to actually help drummers and improve the conversation?
Yeah, what you were saying about, people put drumming over here and then they put life and everything else over here. But actually, if you take a sort of Petersonian ancient Greek view, like we all live in narratives and everything is analogizing. So locking all of your drumming away in a drum analogy space, it's like, okay, you can analogize hand techniques to foot techniques, but then, does life imitate art or art imitate life? And really your analogizing should be limitless, and it's about, one thing that I really enjoy as a teacher is trying to say to someone like, look, you're an upholsterer, right? So in your job as an upholsterer, do you have to do this or this? And once I understand it a bit, I can go, right, this drumming thing's like that. And it's just, my job is like, how fast can I flick light switches on in people's head? Like my job isn't to go, oh, look how good I am, or like this is a paradiddle. It's just to kind of open doors for people.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's gonna...
Teaching is one of the most fundamental arts of teaching is communication, isn't it? Like, because there's various visual tools you can use to communicate ideas with people, but a lot of it's going to be linguistic. And I think the problem with linguistic ideas, every field of knowledge has its own lexicon. And what do you do with a student if you're in the drumming lexicon and they don't understand any of it? Well, you have to reach outside of it and go, well, I'm going to get some words from things that you might understand. Let's take mathematics or physics or dancing or upholstering or I don't know, whatever thing you can reach from in order to try and solve this linguistic problem with this person in order to put the idea in their head. Because the idea is, the aim is just to get the idea in the person's head so that they can understand it. So it doesn't really matter what tool you use, as long as the end result happens in that they can, do what they need to do with their drumming.
Yeah. If someone doesn't have a massive intellect, or they're 7 years old, you're not gonna try and analogize it to some nuclear physics concept, are you?
Yeah, exactly.
But if someone's interested in football, doesn't matter whether they're smart or not smart or young or old. You find a way in, and like you say, all that matters is that they get it, and then you try and give them some realistic goal back in the drumming sphere, and go, okay, let's get that up to 80 BPM for next lesson. Or realistically, it's okay to start at 50 BPM, but in a month we want to be at 100, and maybe in several years we want to be at 200. So, Jack, is everything okay?
Yeah. I just, you could probably hear Seiko, so I was just trying to put a lid on that.
Okay. Can I just say,
Jack,
for the record, I was going to say, for the podcast community, which is all one person that's going to listen to this. Again, hi, Mom, and maybe Francis's mom. Yeah, Seiko's like the best. She's just so nice, just so nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, 10 out of 10
Jack,
Seiko.
Jack, seeing as you had some ideas from this podcast, now we've kind of done a little bit of a rough introduction. Do you want to start bringing these ideas up and give us your take on them?
Well, yeah, I mean, we pulled a couple of Jim pulled some ideas. I mean,
because I wasn't present at the chat you two had the other night, so
yeah. Well, Jim in his organized manner created a Google Docs thing which had some ideas for topics, and I chose one, which was an initial broad statement, but just might we might uncover some things, and it was just like what we think it takes to make or become, like, for lack of a better term, awesome, great drummers. And so from the player's point of view, from the student's point of view, whatever, the drummer's point of view, what do we think it takes? Because we're always, as you said earlier, like, we're seekers, and like every time you sit down in the practice room, you're studying whatever you're studying because you feel it's benefiting you. It's like it's aiding your development. But we also know that you can sit there and make a breakthrough, and a breakthrough can quite often be a realization that you might not have been doing something that's beneficial or actually effective. And so time wasted as opposed to time gained or developed.
I just had a thought to just throw in, just as, like, a phrase there. It's like, it's not about cutting corners, because you can't cut corners. It's just figuring out what's nothing to do with what you're trying to do. Yeah. So every time you cut something, you're not cutting a corner. You're just streamlining. You're shedding dead weight.
Did you see Robert Glass? Well, I know Adam's not on social media, but Robert Glassberg posted this video of him just having a rant, like people asking him to send him the charts of what he's playing, or send him
who's Robert Glasper? Robert
Glasper's a contemporary jazz pianist. He works with he's crossover, so his successful trio, which is Chris Dave on drums and Derek Hodge on bass, and he did the soundtrack for the Miles Don Cheadle movie, which he got a Grammy for, and he's made several great records. So he's in that. He works with Erykah Badu, Yasin Bey, Mos Def, but in the last few years, he is the most popular figure in that kind of in that realm. Do you know what I mean? He's now on the got a seat on the table. You know, he'll be forever remembered. So he's contemporary jazz artist,
like a neo jazz kind of guy.
Yeah, he's funny. So he's really funny and witty. So, you know, social media as well as his gigs and playing and stuff. And he's done everything, man. Now, so yeah, he just had a video of him just having a rant of people asking him for the charts and so on. But what he was kind of saying in one part of the video, it's already been, you know, memeified, and people have jammed to the cadence of his vocals, of his speech and so on. Like, but he's like, he's like, he says at one point in the video, it's like, there is, you know, being lazy and being great are not conducive with one another, and there's you can't cut corners. There's no quick way to be great. And also one point of his video is just that, you know, you've got to figure out what I'm doing, motherfucker. Like, I ain't gonna tell you and send it. You've got to do the work. You've got to write it out. You know, that. And me and Jim were actually talking about transcriptions. It's one of those things. Transcribing. You know, I think as a teacher, you'd always profess like the importance of transcribing, but whether you regularly do it or not is another thing. And I've been doing a bit again recently, and it highlights, you know, the importance of that. And you always see the players that are transcribing. I follow, you know, musicians on social media, and you know, the ones that are transcribing and showing their work is always like a reminder, like, yeah, you got to do it. And I think the people that share the transcriptions that they're doing, it's because they're usually pretty wild transcriptions. And now, like, I found a guy, a Tokyo drummer, and he does these 1 minute jazz clips, and he is taking any drummers, whatever, whether it's Brian Blade, whether it's, you know, classic drummers, Jim Cobb, anything like that, and he's just putting up these 1 minute little clips with the notation along the bottom. So his transcription, and you know, he's transcribing Vinny stuff as well. It's like this obscene stuff. The transcriptions now, I suppose, because we can use technology to help. You know, I when I transcribed something the other day, I put it in Final Cut Pro and put it at half speed, because it was like 120 BPM, 30-second note shit between the kick, snare, and hats, and it was like there was no way I was going to do it without slowing it down. But I think because of that, you know, it's kind of a little easier to, as the art form gets into crazy territory where there's players doing the most innovative stuff, the technology means that we can keep up with that in terms of documenting those ideas. Because, you know, imagine if you were like people like Dave Weckl and so on, they'd be like, rewind the vinyl, just, or the tape, you know, 1,000 times trying to get a couple of bars. And I remember doing that early on with the, you know, Tool songs, when I transcribed Tool songs, because you just had a CD back then. You had more of the enthusiasm to learn the Tool stuff, for example, because it was at a time where there wasn't YouTube, the internet was basic, so you couldn't go online and see someone breaking down the drum parts. So when you're a teenager and you're obsessed with the band, it's like you've got to do that yourself. But now I can just go online and go, right, Danny Carey into YouTube, and I'm going to get hundreds of drum covers, hundreds of drum lessons, and also several drum cams of Danny himself on the gig, you know. So, but yeah, that was this transcription thing has been on my mind a lot lately, because I've been doing it again, and because it's like practicing what you preach, and I always preach the importance thing. We remember, you know, Steve Vai one of the reasons he got the Zappa gig was because Zappa saw his transcriptions of Zappa's work in Guitar Magazine. And that was a reason why, one of the reasons why, Zappa heard of him. That's like, yeah, see that as a very big thing. I don't know what you think.
I wrote down a few thoughts as you were talking. That was all dead interesting. I think I'll just go through in order. In terms of your initial question about what defines a great drummer, or becoming a great drummer, I think maybe you've got to do a couple of things. The first one is you've got to define what is a great drummer. Sorry, your question was how do you become a great drummer? So you've got to define what a great drummer is. I think if you can define what a great drummer is as a set of skills that a great drummer possesses, then that itself will point the way to the things that you need to do. So you could say, well, you need to have good time, you need to have good facility, you need to have good dynamics, you need to be able to develop chemistry with a band, or, to compose interesting ideas. So from that points the way. But I think there's another thing in there as well of, well, like, we're all individuals, right? Drumming isn't just this, I don't know, it's not like, we're not all like computer processors that are just doing the same job. We're all doing, an individual version of this thing. So it's a mixture of, it's the collision of things that everybody recognizes as being necessary, but then you being an individual and expressing your individuality through those tools that make great drummers. So there's some connection between being an awesome drummer and having all of those skills, but also being a great drummer is almost like it's using those skills to fully express your individuality as a person via the medium of drumming or the medium of music. So individuality, it's almost like individuation, it's like a psychological concept, like the Jungian thing, isn't it? It's about, opening this gateway to being able to take all of the ideas in your mind and express them so that other people can see them. Because that's the challenge of any artist, isn't it? That you've got the ideas in here and there's no way to directly interface with another person's brain, is there? You've got to go through this intermediary thing where you go, I'm going to bring these ideas into reality through whatever artistic or creative or, vocational format, so that you can experience them and hopefully you can feel something that I feel when I think about these ideas. To get to your transcribing thing, I think there's another interesting point there as well. I think on one level, I get what Glasper's saying. I have two feelings about it. One is, it's like, okay, it's good, but it's a little bit disingenuous because, like, it's not as if he's never learned from a music book. It's not as if he never had lessons and read transcriptions. And do you know what I mean? It's not like he just learned or unless he did learn everything from ear. And like, if you're going to learn how to transcribe things, you're going to have to learn music theory, and you're going to have to learn how that works by reading other people's transcriptions of things. But on the other hand, I see his point, because I think when you transcribe something, it's like the man who chops the wood warms himself twice, right? If you transcribe something, that means that you have to start employing your ear to listen, and it reinforces it's not just your transcription ability, it's your listening ability that you're reinforcing, isn't it? It's almost like Glass was saying, stop reading it off the page, go and listen to it. Like, actually spend if you love this music, go and listen to it and get to know it. And then maybe in the process of transcribing it and writing it down, employs such a degree of high level listening that by the time you've transcribed it, you don't even need to read it anymore. Depending on how good a player you are, because you've actually listened to all the notes, haven't you? You've discerned the dynamics and the placement of all the notes and their meaning. And I think it was interesting what you said about the technological aspect, that because because when we were growing up, we had like Wecklad of vinyl, we had CDs, people have got YouTube. And to me, that's another example of how the outside world is influencing the art of drumming, because like it wasn't drummers who invented CD players and vinyl players and YouTube and computer processors and all that kind of stuff. And yet that's facilitated the art of drumming, hasn't it? The fact that, camera technology, the fact that it's so cheap and everybody's got one, and we've now got this thing called the internet where we can film things, put them online, and now everybody can see them, and all the accompanying sound technology to make these things audible at a good quality, is another example of how the outside world, of how networked drumming is with everything else. And I think when you said that, you'd have more enthusiasm, to use the CD player or whatever, back in the day, I think that speaks to something else as well, that and it connects to what Glasper's saying, that it's like, if you want to be great, you've got to be deep into this. Like David Goggins said something interesting. He said that the reason there's no greatness anymore is because there's no focus. And there's no focus because there's too many distractions, right? And not only is our dopaminergic system just getting jacked by the internet, our attention spans are getting ruined. And if you want to be great, you've got to have a good attention span for what you're doing. You've got to be able to do the Cal Newport deep work thing and just focus, just get rid of everything else and go, I'm going to spend my time doing this one thing. And I think with these, it was perhaps easier for you and easier for Weckl to do what they had to do, because we didn't have to worry about being distracted by stuff like the internet. Like when I came to Nottingham, right, I had like 75 quid in my pocket. My cousin brought me here in a car with all my stuff. I lived in this crappy little house with two other musicians. I didn't have a television. We didn't have any furniture. I had a CD player and a duvet on the ground, and that was it. And I remember the first sort of session work. I was playing for this extreme metal band, and I couldn't write music. So I just created my own shorthand, and I would sit in my room and I'd literally air drum all the parts, because I didn't have a kit I could go and practice on whenever I wanted. I just air drum all the parts. I had a little tape player. I just rewind it, listen to the riffs again, air drum it out. And I just do that over and over and over and over again. And then when I got in the studio, I could just do it, right? But if I'd have had the internet to contend with, if I'd have had YouTube to contend with, and Pornhub, or whatever other things are taking your attention away from things, maybe I wouldn't have been able to do all that stuff, because you don't know how much control you have over your own your own desires, right? So nearly at the end, just one other thing I wanted to say. And then just to bring it back to Glasper's point, I remember I watched this I was watching I was on sickdrummer.com. It's all, extreme metal drummers and stuff. And I was watching this drum cam thing of this guy blasting and doing all this crazy double bass. I was like, wow, that's amazing. And then I had this moment, this lucid moment where I kind of pulled back and I was like, I can't really hear the guitars or the vocals. I can see the other musicians, but I can hear this buzz in the background. But I could just hear the drumming, right? And I was like, that's the problem with these videos, these kind of drum cam things, is it sucks drumming out of its context. It's the drumming doesn't exist without the context. It's pointless, not always. I mean, I know there are solo pieces for drumming and that's cool. But if you're watching Danny Carey, it's okay, maybe you want to learn his stuff and you want to get it all exact, and that's fine. But something about the culture of going, yeah, just look at this drum stuff. Well, I don't know. There just seems something a bit weird about it, that we're kind of, I don't know how to articulate that point properly. But
I know what you mean, though.
As well, the visual aspects of it, the give me the transcription, show me the video, blah, 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 blah. It's we're turning drumming or music into this visual thing, and it's not a visual thing. It's an auditory thing, right? It's we're taking the listening out of it and turning it into this thing that we're all spectating, and it's so I suppose Glasper's point is to listen, get back to the listening, and maybe maybe in some senses, to get back to the top point, maybe that's something to do with what a great drummer is. Someone who's maybe that's the most fundamental skill is, can you actually listen? And there are loads of people who can't, you know, and you can see that compositionally with people. You know, like I've watched, you know, I've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of gigs and like seen loads of, you know, drummers playing with bands who were technically really good. But when you listen to the parts that they compose to the music, you just like, you're not paying attention to anything that's happening around you. You're not listening to the guitars. You're not listening to the vocals. You're not listening to the form of the song. You're not even listening to yourself. You're like, I was playing with this samba band, and you know, one of the guys in the samba band was a great player, really, really good. And he was talking about how it's dead important when you're in a samba band, how you've almost got to be like, you've got to be mixing it as you're going along by altering your playing. Like, am I playing too loud? You know, can you hear the surdos okay? Am I like, you know, and it was great advice. And then we went out, we started the gig, and he immediately started playing too loud. And he just spent like 45 minutes soloing over the top of everything. I'm stood next to the guy, my eardrums are bleeding. I'm like, you know, you understand this as an idea, but you aren't able to apply it because, you know, your ego got in the way.
Mm-hmm.
So, sorry, I went on a little bit there, but
yeah, that's there's a lot there as well, you know. Yeah, well, go on, Jim. I don't know if you.
Yeah, sorry, Jim.
Yeah, there is a lot there. Well, you know, it's good when I shut up, right?
Yeah. Still getting over
that's
that.
how you measure it. No, that's good. I mean, egos do get in the way. I'll try and surmise what I thought in response to some of that. Yeah, egos get in the way. You don't know what's going to distract you. So, to some degree, it's pot luck, right? So, Adam is an incredibly conscientious person, but he's not going to let people down if he's got music to prepare for a gig, because I think that would really upset you, wouldn't it, Adam, if you let someone down? You know.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, like, I don't want to let anyone down, but I'm like, oh yeah, this week I did 30 hours of brushes, and then next week just nothing but badminton. Like, I'm much more animalistic. Like, if practice gets me for a month, then I do loads of practice. And you know, like, taking it back to Goggins, you know, to what degree can you control what you focus on? And to make a great drummer, one of the things that you need, as well as all those technical skills like dynamic balance, coordination, knowledge of the song form, stylistic awareness, communication, you know, groove patterns, fill patterns, good transitioning skills, as well as all that. That's all in a hierarchy underneath. I can practice. You know, if you don't have that ability to spend 2 hours listening to a Miles Davis record or a Sepultura record, and really pay attention, then you're not likely to emulate it to any meaningful degree, and you're certainly not going to be able to listen to yourself. Listening to yourself is incredibly hard. You know, we're looking for nuggets here, right? So if anyone's listening to this, you know, there's some nuggets that I didn't employ for years and years and years. So things like record yourself, and then when you listen back, you won't sound like you thought you did. Get a mirror in front of you because you don't look like you think you look. You know, like those two are two of the massive ones. Taking it back to the transcriptions, I was thinking the other day, I just bought the Philly Joe Jones solos book, which is a guy called Jörg Eckel, maybe a German guy. If you want a copy, it's like 50 quid. Send me a message and I'll put you in touch with him. A friend of ours just put me in touch with him, and it's just handwritten transcriptions of, like, I don't know, 150 pages of solos or something. So that's cool. But I thought to myself, because Jack and I talked the other day about transcribing, So I was kind of beating myself up. I was like, I don't do enough transcribing. But then I tried to be more realistic, and I was like, well, I remember being 15 or 16, and I was really into System of a Down, and they had a tune on their first album where there's like this triplet tom-tom thing over like I think the bass drums playing like eighth notes. So you get this 2/3 thing. And I found this transcription like 10 years later, and it was pretty bad. Like it was really accurate, but it was badly written. And I'd instead of writing it like how I'd write a polyrhythm now, I think I'd literally just written triplets and duplets on the bottom, and I had no idea how to do it other than you just have to play this on top of this. But by forcing myself to do it, and that's what Glasper was saying, by forcing myself to really pay attention, I had to take on much more responsibility, like practically, creatively, technically, because no one was there helping me. And my teacher was helping me, and other things had helped me. But at some point, like one of the things on our list of things to discuss potentially was, you know, how many exercises should you give to yourself or a student, or should you just give a concept and let people work on it? And I might say to a student, here's 5 grooves, write 5 of your own. And if they come back and they've written 10, I'm pretty confident they're going to be great. If they come back and they've written, then I'm pretty confident that they're just going to be average. You know, so then my job, and I'm not trying to dump on any of my students because they're all doing really well, but then my job becomes like, how do I enthuse you more? Because just giving you drum information isn't enough. You know, I had a conversation with a student's mom the other day, and I was like, you need to get a subscription to Modern Drummer magazine or any drum magazine, whether it's on a tablet or in the real physical copy, because me giving you exercises isn't everything. It's a fraction of it. You know, massive input culturally, orally, visually, you know, conceptually. So really swimming in it, and then, you know, I have done a load of transcriptions, and I write stuff out for students a lot. Yeah, and that's on the nugget list. If you're not doing it, you know, record yourself, get a mirror, and do some transcriptions, even if it's just the form of the tune. And speaking of the form of the tune, I was going through Alan Dawson's Rudimental Ritual book yesterday. Like, I've had it for years and just never opened it, and I was like, I'm going to start working on this. And the guy that wrote it, John Ramsey, he's saying you'd play like 12 bars or 32 bars or whatever it was, and it'd just be like singles or doubles, and Alan would have you sing the form of a tune. You know, so it's just the ability to play really simple and never get lost. And if you don't know the tune, then you're not going to take part in any music, are you? So, and another idea that was floating around when you were talking about, I think Adam was saying about spending time doing stuff. Vic Firth, you know, every time I met him or saw him talk, he'd always say something about perseverance. You know, he's just like, you've got to persevere. You know, and he lived till he was 90 something, and he was just relentless. He was like, new stick idea, new book, new performance, been practicing. He'd pour literally millions of dollars into education and sharing things with people. And yeah, it's just perseverance, you know. And I think he had some problems when he was doing his music degree, and then he got the job at the Boston Symphony Orchestra, and I think some of his teachers were shocked that he got offered the timpanist job, but he just worked his ass off, you know, and then you end up a multi-millionaire with like some massive drum company, you know, and it's not that one company's necessarily the only company that you should care about, but perseverance got him where he is, and I think he was right to talk about that.
Yeah, perseverance is an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, because there's so many factors that aid or prevent someone from, achieving greatness. For example, like I think, although, well, so for example, we've all heard the stories of like the partner that's like get a real job, or the parent that's like get a real job, or they don't see what you believe in what you do, and then there's always the thing. It's like, oh, if you want to earn money in life, you don't be a musician. So you've got to do it for the love of it.
That's really good advice.
Yeah. I mean, everyone that does get the success will say like, I did it for the love of it, and then the money came. But then you obviously that you hear the success story, but how many people that don't get the success, did they quit too soon? Did they not persevere enough? Or were they happy at the end of their life that every day was, joyous, but, they survived without any kind of financial, what's the word?
But what most people would call success financially, but
yeah,
stability, perhaps stability.
Yeah, financial stability. Because I always think that to myself. Am I, like there's things that come at a price. Is I'm happy every day, and I don't feel stagnant, which is quite. I've always worried about that, feeling stagnant, like the idea of like an office job, or routine, monotonous existence or whatever. So every day you don't feel stagnant because you're just in this constant state of frustration. Whether you're procrastinating or being proactive, the mindset's the same, which is you wake up every day and you go, I've got all of this stuff I want to do, I need to do. Some days you do more of it, some days you don't, but it's the same kind of thought process. It's like, right, your head's chock full, as opposed to someone else that might not have that, and then I ask myself, like, that state of mind that's very important. And if would you choose money, or would you choose that state of mind? And I'd choose that state of mind. And then the little dreamer in you is like, oh, and maybe eventually there might be a bit of a financial reward with that, which relates to the perseverance, because none of us do it for the money side of thing. But this doesn't feel like a job, does it? I haven't had a job since 2003. Yeah. And that is that's an amazing thing. So the responsibility that you have to yourself and to the art is like, it requires a lot of work. It requires a mindset, and you really can never rest on your laurels and not, persevere through it all. And because you never feel like you achieve much. If anything, hindsight, you might, I look back and be like, oh, wow, well, you can say, oh, I was obviously did okay at teaching because I started with 2 students, and then over the years I've taught X amount. So, okay, there's the success there, but you don't, the achievements and so on. Oh, okay, I've got a gig with a popular artist that I've managed to retain for, 8 going on 9 years. There's that, but you're not really ever sitting there thinking about that. You're just like, oh, I need to be better. I need to do more. I need to keep improving. And in the grand scheme of things, by no means advanced. We're always, every door you open, you just confronted with 10 more. It's like, oh, I've made a breakthrough, and that breakthrough is just being able to see more of what's in front of you. I think.
Yeah.
You guys stop talking because I've got about 30,000 ideas while you've been speaking. Just
Adam's clearly had 9 cups of coffee this morning. He's ready.
No, I don't know. I was just thinking about a cup of tea. Is it okay if I just respond to a bit of that?
Yeah.
Yeah, please do. I'm going to grab a drink, but I can still hear you.
All right. Okay. In fact, you know what? I need a wee. Can I just have a wee?
Yeah, I'm gonna have a cigarette.
You know what? I'm gonna press pause because that's a thing. Okay, we are recording, mate. That's the best way to edit.
Yeah. Just pause it. Pause it before I say something horrendous.
No, because I had to edit the last one.
I raise my hand, you pause, and then when it comes back in, we'll all just be laughing. You never know what we said.
Yeah. Jack, are you going to subtitle this in Japanese?
One day when my Japanese gets better.
Yeah. Hey, fuck them. What do they need a transcription for, man? They should just they should just learn English.
Yeah. Send me the charts.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Right. God, when you guys start talking, I'm just having ideas. So some of these I might not even be able to remember what I meant when I wrote the thing. Okay. Okay. God.
Unleash the Kraken. Go on.
Right. So we've been asking this question about what a great drummer is, right? And you brought up the thing about Glasper and the send me the charts thing, and he was like, well, just pay attention and like learn it yourself. And I was saying that that's a good way of doing it because you're learning twice then, aren't you? You're improving your music theory and you're improving your ear. If you like sort of want to step outside of this for a minute sort of and look at the big picture, I mean, like, is if someone comes to a more experienced anything, well, let's say drummers, and says, what is a great drummer? Like, they look at you and go, I think you're a great drummer. What is it that makes a great drummer? Is that the same question as saying, send me the charts on a philosophical level? Is it just up to you to figure out what a great drummer is? Is the best solution to that to just go and listen to loads of drummers, right? Because the answer to the question is always subjective. Like, I know some people, like, I think Vinnie Colaiuta is one of the greatest drummers ever. Like, for me, when he plays drums, it's not it's not the fact that he's so technical. It's just the emotional affect of the noises he's creating. There aren't any other drummers who really do it in the way that he does it. He does the things I want drummers to do. He just bends it. He's playing into these shapes and pulls this kind of this fire out playing where I'm just excited. I feel good when I listen to him drumming. It really like does something inside my brain. And like, there's an element of received wisdom, isn't there? That like we could all sit here and go, oh, well, Vinny's the greatest, or this guy's the greatest, or this guy's the greatest. And that kind of funnels people's view as to what a great drummer is. And if drumming and being a great anything is about individuality, like funneling people's view that way kind of detracts from your own individual perspective, doesn't it? Like, yeah, we should recognize that these guys are great. There's no question about that. But as to who the greatest is or to how to become a great drummer, really, if you looked at those guys' journeys, a lot of them would have been, they would have been paying attention to the things that they thought were valuable, if that makes any sense. Okay, so in terms of I'm going to leap around here. I'm really sorry. In terms of, and again, with the transcriptions question, the send me the charts question, if you look at where drumming is now, right, in terms of, like, I saw this thing the other day. It was this like gospel chops guy, and he was just doing he was in like some, I don't know, some drum, like a Music Messa kind of drum event or whatever. He was just on a kit, and he was playing something, and it wasn't like a solo. It was like one of the weirdest phrased grooves I'd ever heard in my life. That was sort of a solo. It was almost like an intersection of like trap music, jazz, crazy gospel chops, and he was phrasing with these like massive gaps of space where he'd just not play anything and then he'd drop a single note in, and it was really angular and kind of weird. And I was like, it was like I could see all the places it was coming from, but at the same time it was almost incomprehensible conceptually what he was doing. You know, like if it grooved, it felt great, but at the same time, like if you'd have shown that to like Gene Krupa, he would have been like, what are you doing? He would have just thought you want me to play drums. But this guy was clearly amazing, and what he was doing was so high level, was so like pushing the envelope. It was amazing. And you know, the reason we've got to that place, the reason drums has advanced so quickly as an instrument, because the kit is a relatively young idea in terms of other instruments like the piano or, you know, string instruments and wind instruments. Like the reason we've got to this place is precisely because of things like YouTube and transcriptions. It's like all these things have sped the art form up, you know, have meant that like you've not had to keep pausing the vinyl, you know what I mean, or pausing the CD. It's like it's just put all these things push the art form forward quicker and quicker. So it's like this exponential increase, like people being able to absorb information from, you know, the cross-pollination of different cultures that can be experienced by looking at things on the internet and going, oh, right, I can hear like pieces of music. I can hear like obscure underground jazz-influenced hip-hop from the Sudan, you know, in 5 seconds. I just push a button and go, Google search, I want to hear music like this, and boom, it comes up. And then as soon as you hear it, you're influenced by it. And then that colors who you are. And it's like the whole thing is just speeding up, and you get what I'm saying, right? But the just to take it back to Jim's thing, where he was talking about with your students, how do I enthuse you as a player? And this issue of distractions, right? It's I had this idea while you were talking that there's this problem that occurs. There's this issue when you improve technology has like an area effect. Okay, like it will improve some things, but then it drags other things down at the same time. There's like this push-pull thing going on. So for example, okay, you create the internet and you give people access to all of this information, like boom, info dump, here it is. And you go, wow, this is amazing, right? But at the same time, the very technology that gives you access to all of this information, which would facilitate your journey, to become a great anything even quicker, also denigrates your ability to do the one thing that you need to do in order to make your way through that sea of information, which is to focus, right? Because what the internet does is, and what it's optimized for, is to jack your dopamine system and destroy your attention span, right? We've all been on clickbait articles, right? Look at what you'll never guess what these Hollywood stars from the 80s look like now. One of them is so gorgeous. We've all clicked on it, right? Okay, and every time you do that, it's chewing away your attention span, which is then destroying your ability to focus, right? So you've got access to all this information, but you're being hamstrung in your ability to focus on it. And it's almost like, in order to become great, you have to focus. But maybe what technology is doing, like back to the Goggins thing, right? Of how do you control what you're concentrating on in order to become great? Maybe what technology does is it acts as a filter. It filters out all the people who can't concentrate, right? It's almost like you have to have some either obsessive dedication to becoming great at something, or almost like some genetic marker, which means that your attention span is just really strong. So even when you're thrown into this sea of distraction, you just follow the line, right? So it's like it doesn't matter how much information you give. The percentage of people who turn into great drummers always remains constant, okay? Because like the technology is affecting people's ability to concentrate on the information they're given access to. Okay, and there's the other issue as well, which is I think the technology the technology does this other thing where like all of us are like a combination of a consciousness and a combination combined with a like a biological organism with drives, right? You know, and one of those drives is to do with status and how we're perceived in society. And you know, there are many great players I've seen on the internet, but there are loads of players I've seen, and I'm not being critical of what people choose to do their time with. I'm not criticizing these people personally, but you know, there are some people that I've seen where like they have an internet channel and they just play famous songs or whatever. So here's me, I'm playing really complicated metal stuff, and I watch it and I go, that's amazing, right? But it's not music. Like, you're not actually making art, you're not contributing anything to the art form. And you think, is this you becoming a great drummer, or is this actually some like impersonation of the drummer's journey that you're actually using to fill up your Instagram thing? Is it like another aspect of this, your biological drives getting jacked by the internet? So it's like, oh, here's a status game that I can play, but I'm just going to use drumming to do it. But I'm not really interested in drumming. What I'm interested in is status. You know, I'm interested in having a channel that people are going to look at so I can monetize it and blah, 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 blah. So, you know, which is valid in its own way. I'm not saying it's morally questionable or anything. I'm just saying perhaps it's not really anything to do with this, you know, if we're looking at it in this purist way, this journey to become a great drummer, because the journey to become a great anything, and let's stick with the drumming thing. It's the hero's journey, right? And in the hero's journey, like I hate this movie. I hate Whiplash, right? But it kind of underlines the hero's journey of being a drummer. Like, one of the things a hero has to do in order to become a hero is to suffer. And part of the suffering of drumming is sitting in a little room on your own, just doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, this obsessive level of dedication to just focusing on this one thing over and over and over and over again until you can do it without thinking about it, and it getting progressively more complicated, you know, until you turn into this great and eschewing all of these other things like pursuing a career, working in an office, making money, having relationships, just so because you just want to be able to be good at this thing. And with the Vic Firth comment that you made, I think within that hero's journey, it's dead important to recognize that if you filter out all the Instagram kind of drummers, it's like there are some people who it's connected to being a young person and having status and, you know, being seen as, I don't know, attractive or whatever, I don't know. But look at the Vic Firth thing. It's not a young man's game. It's a lifetime game, being a great drummer. You know, like, Vinny's still going to be learning. Like, I read this thing where he's like, you know, he's still practicing like 7 hours a day or whatever. And I have this thing where I think about it, I'm like, what are you practicing after this long? Like, you can literally play anything. Like, what are you working on? But, you know, there's always some, like you said, you know, you open one door and then 10 doors open up. So it's just a hydra, isn't it? It never stops. You know, so like the way you feel about yourself as a drummer is probably exactly the same way that Vinny feels about himself as a drummer. But the difference is how you feel about Vinny as a drummer. You go, oh, well, you know, you're amazing, so you must feel like you're amazing. And he's like, no, the reason I'm amazing is because every day I don't feel like I'm amazing, which is why I keep pushing. There's this scene in Scrubs, that comedy, where the black guy goes out with the really grumpy doctor and starts training with him because his girlfriend's saying that, like, oh, you're getting a bit flabby or whatever. So he's out with the doctor and the doctor's dead ripped. And he said, rule number one of training is, he says, I don't love my physique. He says, you have to hate your body. He's like, that's the secret to getting ripped. And he goes out, he just wants to destroy himself every day because he's so, you know, because he wants to have this. And with the, you know, there was an interesting thing about perseverance, he said, because I remember this story that Kenny Aronoff told, where he was like, he was drumming for like Jeff Beck or something, and he played on this album, and Jeff heard the drum tracks and he was just like, nah, it's just not good enough, mate. So they got this session drummer in to come and do the tracks, and he said to Kenny Aronoff, he was like, you might as well just go home, mate. And Kenny Aronoff said the turning point in his career was that moment, and he sat there and he went, no. And Jeff Beck was like, what do you mean? He went, I'm not going home. He's like, what? And he said, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to watch that session drummer. I'm going to learn his parts. I'm going to get drum lessons, and I'm going to become good enough to play with you, Jeff. And he was like, all right then. And that's what he did. And then he turned into the Kenny Aronoff that we all know, because he was like, no, actually, I'm not giving up. I am, okay, I suck, so I'm going to get better. So I appreciate I'm just bouncing all around here.
Oh man, it's awesome.
With I think I have this idea sometimes when you were talking about how you wake up and like your head's got to be full of the same stuff every day, and you don't want the routine, you want the constant feeling of pushing. And I think I almost think like your daily practice, it's always got to feel like the first time you played drums. You picked up a pair of sticks and you had no idea what you were doing, and it was dead hard and dead frustrating, and I think every day it's got to feel like that. Because if you get to the point where it's like, oh, I'm dead comfortable now, boom, it's like then you started plateauing, right? Okay, unless you're like at some Thomas Lang level of facility where nothing's hard, at which point you should be working on other things, right? But that element of challenge should always be there to keep you to keep it spicy and keep it fresh. And one last point. In terms of whether you make money off it or whether you do it for money, if anybody's watching this, which I don't know whether they are, there's a great video where he's talking about people who become creatively successful. And he's like, you get into the creative industry and the deal is this: 99.9% of you will fail, but the 0.1% of people who succeed will just get everything. They'll succeed massively. And that's part of the reason why people take that gamble, because the payoff is so big. But I think if the payoff fails and you don't get it, you've got to be satisfied with just being a drummer, just being happy that like, actually, wealth is a subjective thing, isn't it? Like I'm wealthy from this perspective of I found something that I love and it challenges me every day. And not everybody gets to say that. Like I've had 2 physical problems which have held my drumming back 20 years. And I've talked to you guys about loads, and only in the last couple of weeks I'm within a hair's breadth of fixing both of them. And there was times when I just hundreds of times I could have just given up and gone and done something else, because it wasn't advancing my career working on these problems, but I just couldn't leave it alone. I was like, I have to get through this wall, because if I don't get through this one, maybe I'll just hit another wall in life I won't be able to make it through. But whatever. I'm going to end there. I don't know if any of that made any sense.
Yeah, it did. Can I jump in?
Yeah.
With a comment about
thanks for letting me talk.
No, it was great. The last thing that you said about those technical, physical issues, and starting to have breakthroughs.
Sorry, can I just say, if anybody's watching this who is an Instagram drummer, I don't want people to feel insulted like I'm having a pop at anyone. I'm not. I'm just saying that perhaps they're 2 different art forms. They're aiming at 2 different things. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying you don't have a right to do it or anything like that. Not being critical. So
surreal.
Yeah. Well, I had something to add to that as well, which will hopefully clarify, because I think we probably feel the same about it. That thing about like the physical things to overcome. I was thinking about how solitary all of this sounds with the perseverance and the grinding through it. And what you said about you have to be willing at the end of it to just go, yeah, I'm just a drummer, and that's it. And I think that's right. And I think creative stuff kind of self-selects for people who are willing to just go, well, I just love sitting in my room and practicing. So recently I've been starting practice at like 11 o'clock midnight every night, and I'm just doing like 4 or 5 hours just in here. And
in here, where does Mrs. not need to sleep?
It's quiet. Like I just found the pad. Last night was like 4 hours of brushes.
Right.
I'm pretty sure my neighbour loves it though. Or I just go to my studio, But yeah, the solitary thing, we are in a community, and everyone needs a friend. And if you don't have a friend, you should find a friend. And it's great if you can find a friend who also is into what you're into. Like, so talking about what's it take to become great, well, no man is an island, right? And Jack and I have known each other since we were 16, 17, and then we got to know each other much better a few years later. And I remember Jack said to me when we were like 23 or something, or I was 23, like, oh yeah, I remember you coming in the shop and being like, oh, check this paradiddle groove out, and then going home and practicing it loads. And I was like, no way.
Let me just tell that story, because this is what motivates me personally. Is like in my, and you're talking about plateauing. So I remember that time because, Nottingham's a small place, and then in my small world, I think I was just out of college, but I was maybe out of sixth form college, where like peer groups, musician friends, right? And then and it was clearly a time where I'd not heard anything that had tested me. So I'm probably like, oh yeah, I think I just started teaching and I'm doing great and I'm practicing and I'm working on being a better teacher. But I'm not. I'm in my own little drumming world. So what I'm hearing is me, and what I'm practicing is my stuff. And then I just hear this groove in the neck. I go into the music shop in the drum department and I hear this groove and I'm instantly like, who the fuck is that? What? Because this groove is like, it's like kicking, and it's like, so I poke my head around the door and I see Jim there, and we would have already known each other from Rock City, from going out drinking, and like drumming to basket case on the dance floor. But I was like, it's that guy, it's Jim, and this groove. I was like, what? I can't do that, and why does that sound so good? And like, and then that was the catalyst. It's like, motherfucking fuck that guy. I'm off straight away back. I'm there for a week, like, yeah. And then after like blazing this paradiddle thing, I'm like, phew, because I've in my mind jumped ahead again of Jim.
Yeah,
this guy
equalized it a bit. Yeah.
And then I'm like, but that's like my motivation was a competitive one. That's what spurred me into this, desire to instantly, like, until I felt like I'd achieved this, I couldn't do anything else.
But I can guarantee you. Pardon?
Continue.
Yeah, thanks. No, I can guarantee you that I'd probably learned that groove about 3 weeks earlier from Andy Camis over at the Drum Centre, or maybe Dave Fletcher. Because I'd started lessons there around that time, and I was probably also in like, yeah, I want to kind of like Loz used to work in the shop at that point. I was probably like, yeah, I want to show this guy this thing that I've got, because I'm just dead extroverted and I want to show people what I'm doing. So I've got that competitive thing as well, but I think that's really helpful. So no one's an island. You need a friend. It's good to have some friendly competition, and this is where YouTube and Instagram can be a good thing, because if you're living in the valleys of Wales, or you're out back in Afghanistan, then maybe you can see Dave Elich or whoever your favorite drummer is, trying stuff out, and then that's going to give you a kick up the ass. So it is dead solitary, but part of the hero's journey might also be finding a companion, and maybe that companion can be online, but for us, we're very lucky that it's been physical people. Brings me to some other points about some stuff that Adam said in no particular order. I can't even read my own writing. it looks like it says social media dick band, but I think it says social media clickbait. Yeah, yeah. It's internet addict. Oh, I wrote internet education. You know, part of this again, for if you're listening to this, it's like having some sort of schedule. Maybe something, Adam, you could talk about later is scheduling. Because I've been wrestling with that forever. But you know, educating children or students or yourself about managing your time. So it's like, okay, I'm going to spend 30 minutes a day getting fired up by watching other people, but then I'm going to spend 3 hours practicing. You've got to get that ratio right, because you might get super fired up and then do nothing. And it's like, that's cool, but that's not how you achieve greatness. So I love all those Instagram guys, even though I agree that they might be motivated by money or fame or ego to some degree, or to some different degree to what more creative people are doing that are producing art.
All the
But like
cultures,
you,
all the cultures
yeah,
made people think that to be relevant, they have to follow that style.
yes, yeah,
There's
and
that,
that's what I'm
that's a big
talking about
thing.
with. That's what I'm talking about with internet education. You know, none of us have children, but if I had a child,
That we
and I
know
do have
of.
students,
I was just going to say
well,
that.
yeah, I mean, we've all obviously got children that we just don't know about. Yeah,
Can I just tell you quickly, a friend of mine, I won't say his name, a friend of mine, he used to go to all these rock clubs and stuff back in the day, and he was seeing this girl for a bit, and they split up. She had a new boyfriend. This guy was a bit of a bruiser, so he was like, clear off, you know, don't want to see you in this club again, otherwise I'm going to give you a good hiding, sort of thing. So he was like, okay, fine. So anyway, fast forward 20 years, do you know what I mean? He's living in Oxford with his wife, his 2 kids, got a job, you know, like lovely job. He's a lovely guy, you know, really smart, dead nice person. Opens the front door. Hi, Dad. Just like, oh my. You know, this kid
was it the
still.
guy that threatened to beat him up?
No, it was apparently like when he split up with this girl, she was pregnant, but she just said it was like, you know, the other dude's kid or something like that. Just nuts. Can
Wow.
happen. But he's such a good guy. I bet he just took it in his stride and just did the right thing. So, you know, definitely
Yeah,
no.
well,
He's a lovely person.
man, if someone's your kid, like you know, well, if someone's a human, you should be nice to them. So if they happen to be your offspring, you know, that's an even better reason to be nice to them, isn't it? So, but yeah, internet education, you know, like it's about culture. Jack was saying about the culture of like what's expected and what's normal now. So I'm trying to understand that, you know, yeah, you could aspire to be a world famous TikToker, but you know, and if that's what you want to do, then you should do that. But maybe as you get older, you realise that you know your self worth isn't based on other people's perception of your value. And
Yeah,
Adam and I have say that again, Adam.
that's very important. Yeah, you're absolutely
Yeah,
right.
Adam and I were
That's
talking the
huge.
other day about you know you actually written something down that I read, Adam, about you know I'm going to determine my self worth, not derive it from other people. And I was talking to my cousin the other day, and he's gay, and he was saying, you know, like his dad's got some beef with him because of it, and he's been out for like 20 years, and and he's not happy with his thing with his dad, and he's like, can you talk to my dad? And I'm like, I'm not going to talk to your dad, man. Like, you know, it's your dad's loss if he can't accept you. Like, you can't derive your self worth from someone that you don't like the opinion of. Like, your self worth is whatever you say it is.
Yeah,
Um,
and if his son can't persuade him to like him, then how's someone else going to do it from the outside?
exactly, exactly. So, you know, self worth really is just that. And we've all got an ego, but You kind of have to some degree, put it aside. And I say that as someone who's got an ego, you know. But if you can figure out some rules to live by, then hopefully ego won't destroy you. So anyway, I wrote down here status game versus legitimate art, and then I wrote purity ? And I think if we think about the social psychology of like Jonathan Haidt and people being obsessed with purity, I think it's the same in the art world. Like, we might look at a certain art form and say that's not high art or that's not pure, and other people might agree with us or not. But again, we should perhaps be relatively aloof and just say, well, if that's your art, then that's your art. But if we start trying to apply like super objective standards about art purity, then they might get turned around on us. So there's a big thing about subjective stuff. On the Kenny Aronoff story, I wrote sucking and getting up, and the whole failure thing, and in the beginning of Alan Dawson, well, John Ramsey's book about Alan Dawson, I'm probably not going to find it, but one of the things that was in the introduction was talking about how you have to have this realization and acceptance that you're going to make mistakes and you can't get better without them. And I've had multiple kids in lessons cry because they can't do it, and they're like, it's too difficult. And I've genuinely like given them something that I think is really simple, like bar of singles, bar of doubles, but they're so anxious. And it's like, it's okay to be anxious. I'm not anxious at all. But I've realized as I've gotten older that some people are anxious. So yeah, giving yourself permission to fail, that's fine. But then be realistic as well. Like, don't start at 100 BPM if you can't do it at 50. And that's another nugget. Maybe that's the fourth one. Play really slow and deliberately. So yeah, so getting back up, that's part of the perseverance thing. Adam, you touched on the technological feedback about how we'd got so good because of things like YouTube. And when Jack was talking about transcriptions, I would absolutely say, again, to the people that should be transcribing, like, we live in this age where we're so lucky to have what we have, because I was just, like I say, I was just listening to all these like punk and metal tunes, and just trying to like grab whole phrases because I could only listen to like 10-second chunks. I couldn't slow it down. I couldn't go, oh, is that a 3 snares then a bass? It was just kind of brrr. So really develops your listening, but the ability to chop things up and rip them off YouTube or wherever, slow them down in your own DAW, that's really pushing people. And again, I'd encourage people to, maybe you get Breaking the Code by David Garibaldi, and you get all of his loops, and you work with a DAW, and you create your own loops, and you slow things down. And if you don't know how to do that, you maybe you install Reaper or Audacity, and you learn to.
Any tune's amazing.
Any tune, yeah, okay.
Yeah, any tunes. You can get it on your. I've got it on my Mac, but you can put it on your. I've got it on my iPod as well, and that has. I mean, you can't just slow things down. I mean, you can repitch things and like remix everything. It's dead simple. You put it on your iPod, loads your entire music collection in automatically, and you can set loops and all that kind of stuff. It's an absolutely fantastic app. I've used that for loads of stuff. If I'd have had that when I was starting, that rewinding the vinyl thing, man, you the progress. This is one of those things that exponentially increases people's progress. Yeah. Right. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. No, that's good. On Android, I know the Yamaha Record and Play app does a similar thing. Not sure what the best Android looper is for a phone, because I tend to do everything on my laptop. but yeah, the growth is exponential because the technology allows people to do it. So like I wrote technology plus humans in an upward spiral or cycle, and we're just networking together. And one of the challenges that we're doing here, like maybe 95% of what we're producing here is noise, but we're trying to figure out which corners to cut, aren't we? And then, pardon?
Or what to streamline.
Yeah, what to streamline, exactly. That's what we were saying. And then I think the last thing that I wrote, which was the first thing that I wrote, was we were talking about being great, and I think you said something about, like everyone's got their own version of believing what greatness might be, and you get it from listening to other people. But then, actually, I've got this idea that there are perhaps there are some objective things that can make you great. So yeah, you can deliberately play wonky time, but it's like the Bruce Lee thing. It's like you've got to master the form before you can be like water and let go of the form. So if you want to play time that moves around, maybe you've got to master playing time in a straight line first, in an even way. So I think there are some objective things like dynamics, playing good time, knowing a couple of fills that work. But then I'm also loath to say that there is such an objective thing, because I do agree that you can kind of go in any direction. But going back to, I think it all comes back to the transcriptions thing that Jack's been pushing. Like, if you're a beginner or an intermediate player, then really getting some vocabulary and making it sound nice, like Jack was saying to me when we were talking yesterday, listen to how it sounds, record yourself. If you can do that, you might arrive at a point where you're pleased with how you sound, and again, going to like a Petersonian preparing a meal thing, like maybe other people will be pleased when you play drums in their band as well, and that would be nice because it's a thing that we can do together, right?
Yeah, that's great. I think just hearing you talk, I think I've got it now. I think I've got the definition. But if Jack, you want to, I know we've been taking turns, so Jack, you want to?
No, go on. What have you
okay,
discussed?
so, all right, so, and to anyone watching this, I know, like, probably listening to me is like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? But this is just how I think. Okay, on the paradiddle story, that was brilliant. I didn't know that story. And it also made me realize we all kind of met each other around the same time, because I'm a bit older than you guys. So if you met each other around when you were like 16, 17, that was when you were that old when I met you. So I think we all kind of met at the same time, which is nice to know. When you were talking about the paradiddle groove thing, I remember like what a revelation it was when someone was like, oh, that rudimental thing that's just like bollocks and doesn't mean anything because you're just doing it on a snare drum, you can turn it into a groove, and it's like, wow, the door opens. So I came up with the word groovement.
Right.
Yeah. I've already got a book planned. I've got a book planned for kids. That'd be great. Okay, there's a load of things here, but I'm going to try and get it to go down the line. I liked what you said, Jim, about being deliberate. And I think if you want to compete with the distractions that are being thrown at you by the world all the time, I think there's something about achieving the focus that leads to what we call, we are calling greatness at the moment. There's something about being deliberate. Okay. I watched this documentary that was all about the gaming industry in South Korea. And it was about how they have this like Olympic Games, right? Where they're in this enormous stadium, like 20,000 people. These guys go up and play like StarCraft 2 or League of Legends or whatever it is they play. And they, in order to play this game, these people, it is a young man's game because obviously your brain and your reflexes have to be super fast. You know, the speed these guys are moving out on the mice and keyboards and stuff was just crazy. They play in these teams of like 10 or 11, something like that. And that, you know, they're all sat in front of computers on this big stage with like the screens up on the wall, and the game is just moving at this just mind-blowing speed. And in order to get ready for doing this, these guys had to spend 10, 11, 12 hours a day just playing this game. And they would go and live in these houses, right? And in these houses, it was like each team would have like its own like clubhouse kind of thing. And they'd have a bunch of guys all playing literally all day. That was all they were doing, was just playing this game. And they'd have like an administrator who's running the team, making sure, you know, like the house whip or whatever, making sure they're all on target, right? So there was a guy, like a doctor, who was studying the effects of addiction on the human brain, because when people get addicted to things, it does actually have you can actually see the physical signs of it in people's brains when you do a brain scan. It does something, I don't know what the words are for it, but it has an effect. And so he was doing brain scans of different people. And obviously in South Korea, like gaming's a huge thing, whether you're doing it professionally or not anyway. And these guys who win these contests, you know, they're winning like millions of, I don't know what the currency is, but they become like millionaires. You know, they get set up for life or whatever, like superstars over there, like football stars over here. So he was doing these brain scans on people, and he found something really interesting, that when he did the brain scans on the people who did this, who, you know, playing for like 12 hours a day in these games teams, they didn't have any of the physical signs of addiction at all. And yet some people did, but none of these like pro gamers had it. And he was like, well, you're playing games more than anyone, so why haven't you got it? So after spending ages thinking about it and analyzing all of his data, he realized what the difference was. And he realized that if you go home, you work in an office or whatever, and you're like, I'm just bored, so I'm just going to entertain myself, and I'm going to play this game for hours every day, then you would develop all the symptoms of addiction, right? But the difference between people like that and these pro gamers were, the pro gamers weren't playing the game to play the game. They were playing the game so that they could get good enough to be in this team, so they could get in this contest, so they could win the contest, so they could become rich, so they could buy a house, so they could have a family and get their life set up. Like, so it was deliberate, right? There was a deliberateness to what they were doing. It's like, it wasn't about the game. It was about going up this pyramid, and something about the framing of it, the mental framing of it, actually changed the neurological effect that playing the game had on their brains. There's a similar thing with fighter pilots when they got into dogfights. They were measuring stress on fighter pilots, and they found that some pilots had all the physical symptoms of stress and some of them didn't. And they found that there was a difference between certain types of people. Certain types of people went into dogfights and were like, this is really stressful, I can't handle it. That's what they were telling themselves. Whereas some people were like, this is dead exciting, like, I like this. You know, they were engaging with it. They weren't trying to get away from it in their minds. They were engaging with it, and therefore they bypassed all the stress mechanisms. So there's something about framing things in your own mind which determines how the outside world is affecting you. And I think when you're dealing with these distractions on the internet, I think in order to resist the effect that they have on you, I think there's something about being deliberate, that it's like, prior to engaging with this ocean of information, the goal's already set. I'm going to be a drummer, right? Okay, so immediately your brain's just filtered everything else out, and you go, right, here's the line. Or the line might go in various directions, but you're following the line of being a drummer. Whereas I think, you know, when I was young and I was listening to music, it was dead obvious what I wanted to do. You know, I just listen to music. I'd hear drummers playing. No other distractions in my life. I read books. I, drew pictures all the time, and I listened to music, and that was it. And so listening to drummers do their thing, I was just like, I want to do that. I didn't have this internet with millions of videos of people being amazing at every other thing and going into that and going, oh God, I don't know what I want to do. And I suppose because of my insecurities when I was younger, if I had been exposed to the internet, that would have been problematic, because I did like drumming, but also I wanted to be great at something for egotistical reasons. And I had a limited range of choices. So drumming was the one, and that became the line. But if you just want to be great because you want to be great, okay, rather than being great at something, okay, then I think the technology you get exposed to is going to be more of a distraction to you. And that filters in to the next point, where I kind of felt like I came to a conclusion about something, which is that I don't want to get too deep into politics here, but we live in kind of a strange culture now. And we live in a culture that is at once quite unforgiving, obsessed with perfection. And because it's obsessed with perfection, people can't make mistakes. And I think when you were talking about kids being anxious in their drum lessons, problem is, okay, I'm going to try and assemble this point. I'm going to do it badly. Okay, so if you can pull something out of this, then great. The problem is this. We see a picture, we see a video, or hear a recording of just an amazing drum performance, right? And we go, wow, I want to be able to do that. But the problem is, temperamentally, everybody's different. We've all got different personalities, right? So, like, out of us three, I'm probably the most uptight, stressy person, whereas you two guys are much more laid back. Now, the thing is, you see this thing and go, I want to do that. So you go to a drum teacher, I go to Jim, and you go, right, this is what you got to do. And then straight away, you run into this wall of discomfort, which is like, oh, this is actually hard. This is difficult. This requires me to apply myself physically and mentally. And as I'm doing that, I'm running up against several things. I'm running up against my own temperament, which is sort of impatient and stressful. And I'm running up against my own insecurities. And I'm running up against the expectations of a culture that wants me to be perfect all the time. And in engaging with this activity, I now know is very hard. I'm really realizing how imperfect I actually am. Okay. So there's all these things like clashing into each other. And I've noticed with kids that when you're teaching them, you'll spot the ones who are like faffing around and not working, like if you're in a group or whatever. And sometimes I've taken, had little chats with the kids and stuff and said, I noticed you weren't doing anything then. And they look like they're joking about with their mates or trying to be cool or blah, 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 like that. And you'll have a chat with them. You'll be like, why weren't you doing anything? They'll be like, oh, I don't know. Blah, blah, blah. And you'll be like, you don't like being uncomfortable, do you? They're like, what do you mean? I was like, when you can't do something, do you get frustrated? And they were like, yeah. So sometimes I've had kids where I'm like, let's just me and you do it now. There's no distractions. There's no other kids here. There's nobody for you to mess and joke around with. Let me put the spotlight on you and see what happens if you make an attempt to do this thing that we're all learning. And there's like loads of kids who are like, they seem dead confident. They'll get into doing it, and 5 minutes in, they burst into tears. They'll be like, you don't like being frustrated, do you? And you're getting frustrated with yourself because you can't do this. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, that's why you're avoiding doing it, because you run up against this internal wall, which is like, oh my God, there's cultural expectations, there's personal expectations, there's my temperament, there's all this stuff happening inside me. And I smash up against this wall of, this is really fucking hard. Because it is, being great at anything is really fucking hard, right? So, okay. Now, the problem also is the technology, right? Rewinding a vinyl or a CD, Jesus, that's fiddly, right? Okay, especially if it just clicks back to the beginning of the track and you only want it to go back 10 seconds. You're like, oh, for fuck's sake. Tape players are better than this. That process itself is annoying. Like, that is difficult. And that itself requires perseverance to go, Okay, I'm going to drop the needle again, right? Oh, I'm in the wrong place again. You know, like just the process of approaching the difficult thing is difficult. But that promotes perseverance, doesn't it? The perseverance to go, I've not only got to learn how to play drums, I've got to learn how to drop this fucking needle on a record, you know, in order to be able to learn how to play the drums, right? But the technological interfaces we have now have just got rid of all that difficulty. It's like, press this button. It's like, cool. So there's one layer of difficulty that's already been removed. So I think we've kind of lost something there in terms of pushing people. And I think if you're unable to deal with frustration, you're unable to deal with discomfort, that's going to lead to possibly going to lead to procrastination. And what's interesting about the Kenny Aronoff story is that he just sat there, was told that he sucked, which is one of the hardest things to hear, by a pro musician, and just went, right, I could just go home and all this ends now. Yeah. And I just go home and like, okay, I suck. Or I could run into this massive wall of discomfort where I just have to sit here going every day going, I suck, I suck, I suck. And I have to just keep running into this wall of discomfort before I actually get to the point where I'm like, I don't suck anymore. Right. You know, when he did that, I've got a side point here about addiction. I've been looking at loads of stuff about childhood post-traumatic stress disorder, and the so there's a guy called John Bowlby who looked at this thing. Do you know about attachment styles?
Yeah, a little.
Okay, so attachment styles.
Just give us the brief overview.
Okay, so attachment styles are there's three basic ones. There's anxious, avoidant, and secure, and it's all determined by how your parents responded to your needs when you were very, very small. So like if you cry and every time you cry your parents turn up, what you internalize is like, oh, everything's all right. So you grow up with this kind of, you know, this secure feeling around other humans. But if they don't turn up, then you either become anxious, which means you're like, oh, I'm chasing after people all the time, or you become avoidant, where kids just go, yeah, nobody's turning up, so I just have to do things on my own. All right. But in these sort of anxious and avoidant attachment styles, people like that have more of a propensity for addiction. And in avoidant attachment styles, avoidance can take a number of different forms. Like avoidance could be eating junk food, taking drugs, could be staring at your phone all day. So back to the things that could prevent you from exposing yourself to discomfort and working hard to get along this journey to greatness. Like your attachment style could influence that. Because if you're an avoidant person, then you don't like any kind of discomfort whatsoever, right? So like you could go on the internet in order to look for information to make you a better drummer, and your attachment style could end up pushing you towards things that are actually addictive instead. Anyway, final point. So the conclusion I came to with this is this, right? The idea of greatness, right, in a drummer, in anything, there's this like outside subjective way of looking at greatness where we go, here's this person who can do things that are manifestly very difficult to do. And I don't have to be a drummer to tell that like what Chris Dave is doing is incredibly difficult, right? And I think what we internalize about their greatness is not the fact that they can do it. It's the knowledge of the journey that it required to get there. And what makes people great is their willingness to expose themselves to the discomfort that they're going to face on the journey to being able to do something very hard. And that's what makes people great. That's what makes anybody great, is that it's like we all gravitate towards comfort, right? Okay. Nobody likes discomfort. You know, Goggins has made this point a bunch of times, and it's like, to me, that's the greatness. It's not the fact that you can do, you know, 1 billion strokes in like 1 second. It's the fact that you sat there and pushed yourself through that uncomfortable journey going, this is really hard. I really suck. I'm dead frustrated. This is impossible to deal with. I don't think I'm going to make it. I feel dead insecure. Where's my life going? Blah, blah, blah. And there was a bit of you that just went, just keep going. Just keep turning up. Like Jojo Mayer says, you know, have faith in the motion. Just keep doing it. Like Vic Firth, just keep going, persevere, push through all that bullshit that's telling you to stop, like when you're in the gym. And I think for me, that's what makes people great.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's wicked. Yeah, super well. And I think I would add on to that. How do I formulate this? Subjectively, when you see greatness in other people, I'm just saying what you said in another way. You're recognizing that someone else put themselves through the ringer, like, because we all know that you can't do those manifestly difficult things unless you're incredibly persistent and hard working or obsessive. And you've also been fortunate enough to cut through all the nonsense that was always trying to get in your way. So yeah, greatness is like the subjective experience of recognizing someone who's been on an outrageous journey, and that's why we respect skills so much. And perhaps going back to truly biologically objective stuff that's built right deeply into us, perhaps that's where the halo effect comes from. You know, you see someone who's good at one thing and you assume they're going to be good at another thing, or you see someone that's attractive and your brain goes, oh, you're good at being attractive, you must be good at maths, you know. And it's like greatness at one thing is a proxy for the capacity to be great at anything,
Because you
perhaps.
deal with the discomfort.
Because what, sorry?
Because you can deal with the discomfort. Like if you've dealt with the discomfort once, you're capable of
Yeah.
doing it again.
Yeah. Or maybe even you're like me and you don't really experience much discomfort. You're just purely driven by enthusiasm. But it doesn't matter, because that's the sort of person that you would like to follow, you know, whether it's your tribe 10,000 years ago, or following them into a war, or going to a gig and being like, I think you can make 10,000 people move their bodies together and then we can all have a transcendent experience, you know.
But
Like,
your difficulties are different though, Jim, I think. I think you're temperamentally, you're much more laid back. Like you said about, I'll do a month of practice and then just do badminton. I think my perception of your difficulty would be that it'd be hard for you to just relentlessly pursue that line and not get distracted by other things.
yeah, I go through phases. I do. Can we just have a quick pause, please? Right. Okay. So, brief break. We're back. Adam, I'm just going to say my last two little thoughts that I wrote down, and then I just want you to redefine your greatness again, and then we'll just draw a line under that. Is that cool?
Mm-hmm.
Talking about kids and the avoidant thing, I think what you were saying about tech being too easy, it's great. So here's another practical nugget. If you're a teacher, perhaps, and I might be wrong, but this is what I do. I just give students tasks, right? I'm like, install this software on your computer, right? I don't care if you're 10, figure it out, you know. And I'm like, I kind of Stephen Covey it. I'm like, you can call me anytime and I'll help you, you know. And then they end up either doing it and they probably don't call me, or not doing it. And then it's like, okay, I just need to keep encouraging you, you know. But I'm always trying to give them me as a resource. So giving them tasks, transcribe this, install this, you know, because the tech might be easy, but they've got to learn to use it, you know.
Yeah,
So
that's
there
a
are
point.
still
Yeah,
there
that's a
are
good.
still challenges. There are still
Yeah.
challenges, And also as well as an educator, like, what are you doing? And I'm guilty of this as well, right? I'm not perfect, and there's loads of gaps in my music technology skills. But it's like, what are you doing to open all the doors for your students so that they don't have the vinyl experience of the guy in the 60s? You know, because that's just, it's good, but perhaps it's not optimum in the modern age. Yeah, so and I wrote opportunities to learn resilience. You know, so if these kids don't get opportunities to fall, and then you're not there to sort of support them, you know, and I wrote, maybe they haven't learned to praise themselves, you know, so they're sitting there, you know, when you were like, they play for 5 minutes and they look really confident, then they just start crying. I've had that. And it's like, then the conversation is all about, you know, you were doing really well, right? And just because I wasn't saying that's great, keep going, right? You know, here are some questions you could ask yourself. Was I still with the metronome? Did the song feel good? If it didn't feel good, what could I do about it? You know, if I don't know what the difference between feeling good and not feeling good is, do I just stop playing and just listen to Michael Jackson and just learn what it should feel like as an experience, so that then I've got something to compare myself to? Because if you are a bit avoidant or anxious generally, then these are the sort of skills that you'll need to develop. And I've seen kids go through, and then they turn into more rounded people again, which is kind of the point of art and everything that we're doing. And I just wrote down, you know, they just need some love, like, and that's true for adults as well. I was saying to Jack when we were talking this week, I teach a guy in his 50s, taught him for like 7 years, and you know, I feel like in the last year or so, we're starting to get to the point where I can be like, how are you going to break this exercise down? And he's like, oh, I'll just do the hands, or I'll think about what the left hand sounds like and sing the rhythm. And it's like, great, good work, you know. But initially, it was just too scary, or too complicated. Maybe just didn't understand. But confidence is a big thing, as well as technical proficiency. So yeah, that's what I think. So if you want to respond to that, and then maybe reiterate your greatness thing.
Okay, so I think just to make the tech point and discomfort point land a bit better, I think, okay, the journey to greatness is going to involve some discomfort. That's unavoidable. Okay, and the level of discomfort you experience is going to be mediated through your temperament being instantiated by biological, environmental factors, social factors, you know, parental factors. And I think one of the things that technology, one of the problems of it, is that although it can exponentially increase the speed upon which you can go on this journey and acquire knowledge, it also jacks anti-discomfort mechanisms that are instantiated by your temperament. So if you've got temperamental issues, you want to avoid discomfort, and the technology has a way of latching onto those mechanisms and going, well, just get distracted by this, just get distracted by that, as ways of pulling you away from the discomfort and away from this journey towards greatness, I think. And I think with what you were saying about praise with kids, I think it's not just about self-praise. I think it's about contextualization. I think it's about teaching people that your inability to perform this particular thing has nothing to do with your value as a person. I think we need to start separating out our value as people from our ability to play the drums. Because if you can do that, then you can play something badly, and you can employ that process you talked about, where you go, okay, well, that bit wasn't in time, this bit wasn't loud enough. You can identify all the aspects that weren't functioning and why they didn't function from a musical perspective rather than an emotional perspective. Like, I couldn't play that because I'm shit, because I'm a bad person. So I think, but just to reiterate ultimately the thing we recognize as greatness is it's like the complexity of the thing that you're doing, the difficulty of it is directly proportional to the difficulty in going on the journey to acquire that facility. Like we see the difficulty in it. And like that's not the only purpose of it. I mean, it's like Peterson says in it, when you see some amazing performance of like a gymnast and they're right on the edge of failing and somehow they don't. There's something about seeing that where you're like transcendent, isn't it? It's like that's what all of this is about. That's what greatness is about. It's like there's this depressing idea that we're just biological puppets, you know, and being pushed around by these forces, and we're just like animals that can talk and we wear shoes, right? But like, you know, it's the need in humans to believe that we're better than that, we're more than that. And it's like, how do we prove this to ourselves? It's like we go on this journey where we've got all these internal drives going, yeah, don't do that, that's too hard, don't do this, just do this instead, just go and eat another cheeseburger, have another Mars bar, go and jerk off again, you know. And like the ability to push all of that aside and go down this line, you know, that's the bit that makes you better than an animal, that raises you above. That's the thing that transcends other people in watching your performance, is the fact that you've transcended to some degree, that you've, every time you push comfort aside and you go, no, I am going to do another 5 minutes on this thing that's hard, I am going to push myself through this again. It's like you're raising yourself up, aren't you? And I think that's why it's beautiful to see. And that, I think, to me, you know, that's where the greatness lies, I suppose, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And I think what you just said is real as well. I don't think the fact, in my opinion, I think it's a fact that that is a process. That's a thing you can identify in yourself and others around you. Like, it's not an idea that you can transcend your biological limitations. It's a fact that you've got this software in your head, and because of that, you can be more than just Joe Bloggs who walks around the street and that's his job. You know, like that's nothing. You know, that'd be the worst job ever. But like, you know,
street,
yeah, yeah. Not at night though. Wouldn't be a night walker. But yeah, we can. You know, it's true. You can transcend yourself. So yeah, that's cool. That's great. Before Jack has to go, Jack, the thing that we talked about putting to bed.
We can't do it now. It's podcast. It's the next podcast, mate. We'll be here all night.
Okay. All right. Do you want to wait? Cliffhanger. Do you want to just tell people what it is that we're going to do?
Yeah. So how did we articulate it? Put into bed this misconception that molar is a convoluted, unnatural, and unnecessary technique that's just, you know, that's wrong, right? It's this, the put into bed the what is molar technique, and you just put into bed the fact that all of these misinterpretations of the technique have made it given it this notoriety and warped it into something completely different. But we just want to show what molar is and just highlight that it's just a natural way to move the body and to work with the stick as opposed to against it, and just finding the optimum natural way to move.
And also
right?
this go on.
No, you could probably.
I was going to say, one of the things that we wanted to talk about and demonstrate was dispelling this idea that the stone rebound method and the molar informal thing, like with the different ways of approaching the double stroke roll, they all end up in the same position. And this idea that there's one system that totally disagrees with another, they all end up doing the same thing. And I'm kind of sick of people going, that's right, that's wrong. And it's like, yeah, but you're talking about definitions and words. You're not looking at what's actually happening. So put yes, semantics, when really we don't want to have a technical discussion. We want to talk about art and the journey that we're going on. Like, it's just a tool, right?
Yeah. So let's talk about that next time.
Safe. Right. Is that it?
Yeah.
Last thing, what should people check out that you've checked out very recently? Just one line job.
Sicario.
Nate Mercer. Go on. Sorry, we interrupted.
I was just going to say Sicario. It's a great movie.
Nice. Jack?
Yeah, Nate Mercero's album Joy Techniques. But after Adam's talking about dogfights and pilots and the anxiety, I just kept thinking about Cougar turning in his wings at the beginning of Top Gun. So maybe we should go back and all watch Top Gun.
Well, when's Top Gun 2 out? Is Top Gun 2 out yet?
After the pandemic, innit?
Right.
After, when they can make some money at the office.
Yeah.
I want to big up Monty Python and the Quest for the Holy Grail, my favourite film.
Piff.
And Piff, pipes. And musically, I just want to say, what do I want people to listen to? I just really, really enjoyed listening to Thick of It All as a teenager, so maybe you should do that. So, cool.
Buy music, buy albums.
Yeah. Oh, and like maybe get a lesson or something. That
oh
could
shit!
help.
Yeah. Get some lessons.
Yeah.
Preferably from us.
Yeah, you're one of us guys. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, all three of us. It's only £100 an hour, right?
Mate, it'd be the most mind-blowing lesson you'd ever had.
There'd be no drumming.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Take a lesson, Adam.
Oh, and actually, this greatness thing. Just watch the new Zappa documentary by Alex Wynn, that people know of Bill and Ted fame, but he's more of a director. So Zappa, that.
Yeah.
Is there any Vinny in it?
Yeah, there's a bit of Vinny in it, but not much, because it's not what you'd think. It's not looking at the eras. It's got more of a philosophical kind of view. He just doesn't want to do another. Oh, this is Zappa. He was a virtuoso, and his bands were blah blah blah. It has a, it sticks to a strong theme about Zappa that's maybe not been as looked at as much on film. So it's like it's a hearty piece of material. So there's not much that era. There's very much the beginning era of Zappa, but what I thought the golden years musically kind of washes over a bit, because that's not the message, and that's not what it's talking about. The era, going through the eras. But in terms of greatness, there's a strong message there about someone striving to be better all the time with the most insane work ethic imaginable.
And I tell you what, he knew his self-worth, didn't he?
From a very young age.
Yeah.
Or at least he didn't question it.
Mm.
Yeah. He had faith in himself, right? Yeah. Cool. Right, play a brush, and Clayton Cameron, if you want to play a brush, I reckon. Cool. Peace.